I'll direct some traffic where it's
Okay.
It's Dr. Romer. The one figure that just leaps off the page from this report is that even after job growth returns, you don't see unemployment coming down to 6% until 2015. Isn't that a pretty bleak assessment of what 6 years of the Obama presidency is going to deliver?
So the first thing to say is to remind you this is exactly the same forecast that you saw a couple of weeks ago when we did the budget, right? So it is the administration forecast, and as I think we described at the time, we had, we tried to do an honest, conservative forecast to make sure that we were basing our budget numbers on a, sort of as close to the consensus and reasonable forecast as we can. I think it is important to realize that certainly when we did this forecast, we had a placeholder in there for some targeted jobs measures, but it's certainly when things were still very fluid. And I know for, in particular, the Council of Economic Advisors are very enthusiastic about the small business jobs and wages tax credit, and certainly things that are now moving through both the House and the Senate in that kind of area. I think that's the kind of a proposal that might have the chance of moving the dial, of being particularly effective. So I think what's really going to matter is, you're right that the forecasts are certainly something to be concerned about, and that's why the president has said job creation, more of these movements are going to be important going forward to make sure we can get that down as quickly as possible.
Mark, let me just add to that too. As we've discussed, the chart that I handed out on Friday, the hole that we're climbing out of is it currently stands at 8.4 million lost jobs deep, right? Again, taking the recession in 1981, 1991, and 2001, they don't cumulatively equal 8.4 million jobs. So what most people I think recognize as the worst downturn in our economy in most memories, 1981, combining that with the most previous two doesn't equal the downturn in the economy that we saw. The job growth alone isn't all of it. You looked at, we had I think the statistic I saw that I probably got from Dr. Romer was you had consecutive quarters of more than 5%, more than negative 5% economic retraction for the first time since the Great Depression. So I think it's important to understand the sheer size and the magnitude of what we're dealing with.
What you just said leads naturally into what some of the critics are saying this morning, which is that what you've just described as documenting the challenges is really an exercise in blame shifting. Is it?
No, the fact that we lost 763,000 jobs in January of 2009 isn't blame shifting, it's a fact. The fact that we were, as Dr. Romer said, averaging 700,000 jobs lost a month in that quarter is a fact. The notion that we are now where we are, losing in November we had positive job growth, but we're getting much closer to the margin of zero. That's a fact. This isn't blame shifting. Look, there are millions of people in this country that have lost their job. They've lost their job because we had a risky financial system of which the president wants financial regulatory reform to lay down rules of the road so it never happens again. We had a bubble and bust economy, again, another chapter that they'll talk about, where we thought somehow job growth could be predicated on the availability to get an American Express card or a housing loan, okay? That's not going to get fixed overnight, and it's never, under the president's ideas, not going to happen again. What we have to do is lay a foundation for the fact that, how do we address for the fact that largely for the last decade, we didn't create jobs and people saw their wages either flatline or stagnate. Those are monumental challenges. Whose fault it is will be decided largely by history. But there are 8.4 million people that don't care about what history decides. They want a job.
Yeah, and I just want to add, I mean, exactly what the entire report, it is all facts, right? It is just simply, it's not trying to shift blame. It's just trying to say, here are the challenges that we face. And it's fundamentally, it's what the economic report is supposed to do. It's saying what's the motivation for the policies going forward.
Karen.
One of the numbers that is new in the report is the forecast for 95,000 payroll creation, and that's a pretty tepid growth. And I'm just wondering, are you saying that if you get the jobs bill that you think the jobs growth can be stronger than that, or does it already assume that?
All right, so the first thing to say, that 95,000 is very consistent, say, with other forecasts. So I think the Blue Chip just came out yesterday. They asked a special question. They think on average in 2010, it's going to be 116,000 jobs a month. So we're very much in the range of other forecasts. You know, what I was saying is that is, I think, a reasonable estimate. It's our best estimate going forward. It did not have in place, it didn't take into account the specific form of any jobs bill going forward. We know there's still a lot of uncertainty about what will come out of Congress. At the time we did the forecast, there was even a lot of uncertainty about what exactly would be proposed. So it was certainly the case. The reason we're proposing things like small business lending, the jobs and wages tax credit, the energy retrofit program, is because we think those will be particularly effective. And so, you know, I think what the president's going to do is to put in place the best that we can, working with Congress, and then see if we can get better performance. That, of course, would be what all of us are hoping for.
Can you also respond to the Republican argument that what is holding back people from hiring is the uncertainty about legislation on health care, cap and trade, and things like that that's making businesses more cautious?
You know, I think, you know, having talked to a number of business people, especially I really found our job summit incredibly useful. What I certainly hear from business people is the main uncertainty that they face is the economy. It's not legislation. It's not any of that. It is the demand going to be there? Is the economy going to grow and be strong? And, you know, I think that is exactly what the president has focused on. And by doing the kinds of policies that he has proposed and wants to continue, I think that's going to be the main thing that helps us to resolve that uncertainty. You know, just the more we can get good growth like we've seen in GDP, I think that's going to help with a lot of the uncertainty.
Does your jobs forecast, the 6%, does that assume no jobs bill gets passed this year? Does that assume no more government stimulus, new stimulus, or?
So certainly this is the forecast that went into the budget, and certainly it's designed to be a post-policy forecast. And
you assume that some jobs.
So it had in the 100 billion targeted kind of thing, but it didn't have the format. And I think one of the things that I've tried to describe is I think, you know, we have some ideas for particularly good format.
Talk about housing foreclosures a little bit. There was another number that came out today, and I assume it's addressed a little bit in that. But are you concerned that this number is going to keep growing? Since there were so many, you guys put some temporary halts in it, and then now over the next few months it's going to grow. And when does it stop growing?
So certainly foreclosures are a big issue. Housing in general is a big issue. So it's discussed in both Chapter 2 on the rescue, but also Chapter 4 kind of going forward. What do we think is likely to happen sort of as we go back to full employment? You know, obviously housing has been sort of a major part of where this crisis started, right, with the decline in housing prices and the problems certainly there. That's why we've had a very aggressive housing program, and again, that's described and certainly in detail in Chapter 2. I think going forward, that is certainly, you know, it is one of the headwinds that we're facing. I mean, part of the reason why, you know, even, you know, we are seeing growth, but part of the reason coming out of this recession, most people are forecasting a number like 3% GDP growth in 2010, is we do know that we are still facing headwinds. It has been just a terrible recession, and part of that is the financial crisis, part of that is getting lending back, and certainly part of that is going to be this persistent problems in housing. And I think you know, that is going to be something that we're working against. We do think we have good policies in place, but it is going to be something that we're going to have to be working to deal with.
You said overall this is a conservative forecast, and you, of course, may recall that there was a time when you issued a report, I think it was 8 or 8.5% unemployment you said would be the max, and it went up, of course, to 10%. Was there an effort here to avoid being overly optimistic so that you didn't get burned politically down the road? And has anybody in a senior position, the president or anybody else in the White House, ever said to you, hey, err on the side of conservative rather than optimistic so we don't get burned politically?
No, I mean, every time we try to do the best we can. I think that's, you know, the truth is we don't have a crystal ball. Every year we try to do an honest, reasonable, conservative forecast to make sure that we are basing our budget assumptions on the best you know, possible forecast that we can. We try to inform our decisions by looking at what other people talk about. You know, one of the things I do want to mention, though, I think I mentioned it at the budget press conference, and Peter Orszag said, that's economists for I told you so, because we did take a lot of heat last year for both our GDP